Welcome to the totally awesome fishing show. This time we're down on the beach. Fabulous looking beach we've done films here before. It is St Aldwy's Bay, and of course we're staying at St Aldwy's Holiday Park in one of their caravans way up on the cliff there. Fabulous caravans, they're right on the spot. You just walk down the beach and away you go fishing. But this is a beginner's tips to basic casting with a multiplier. Now, a lot of guys use fixed balls like this. Now they're easy to cast with. I like them all the time, but people say, well, why do you not cast with a multiplier, Graeme? Because you get what's called an overrun or a bird's nest. Now, I've done 30 years worth of beach fishing with multipliers, so I've had my experience with bird's nests or overruns. I know all about those, could write a book about them. But yes, I can cast with a multiplying reel, but I don't bother because one bird's nest when we're filming, and that could be 15 minutes worth of fishing gone. So the reason we use fixed balls is because we're straight out with the bait, fishing immediately, maximising that fishing time. However, people should know that a multiplier reel casts as well, if not further, once you get to master the art of casting, than possibly a fixed ball reel. Anyway, fixed balls first, I'm just going to tell you. If you're casting with a multiplier, you can't just do a sort of overhead snatchy cast without laying the rod on the ground, because the initial momentum taken from this end behind me to cast that way comes at a bit of a snatch at the other end, and that can start that revolution, the extra speed up of the spool of the reel, which starts a bird's nest. You really need to come around in an arc. Now, if you watch when I do this one in a second, you're going to see with a fixed ball reel, you can actually do that, because as soon as you've made that cast, I'll just do it here for you. I can put the lead right behind me, I'm only going to lob it. As soon as you make the cast, bang, the line is released, it's gone, it's all loose, it's flying out, it's whizzing out. No problem at all. So it's easy to cast straight overhead casts from a sort of a dead standing position, right? That's okay, that's a good way to cast, and you know, it helps you if you're in tight spots, especially if you've got a bank of rocks behind you or a cliff face. It's dead easy just to turn around, get that bait in the water. A multiplier, I find, I'm no expert, is best if you can either lay the lead on the ground and accelerate it off so you don't get that initial snatch, or far better, we're not doing pendulum casting. All you experienced guys out there, please don't email us, we're not even talking pendulum casting. I did used to make a cast, I used to call it the 45 whip. Years ago, I wrote it in a magazine called, I think it was Rod and Line magazine, and it was what I found to be the easiest way without getting too many bird's nests. Anyway, you start with a sort of a good swinging motion of the lead. As it goes away from you, you build up. Instead of coming over your head, you come around in a probably a 50-degree arc. Now, you don't have to measure it with a protractor. Let's say 45 degrees. You just come around and you accelerate it up and high into the air. And that way, you're moving all that power that you've built up in the rod, smoothly starting the multiplier to revolve, and it hopefully will minimise that, well, let's face it, the dreaded bird's nest. So just remember, a fixed ball reel you can cast overhead because it flies straight off the front of the spool. You can see the line going out here. It can be done. It's simple, it's easy. But for a multiplier, you need to be a little bit sharper. Now this one is, I'll tell you what it's called because somebody's bound to, I can't even read it. It's one of the Accus ones. It's called a S-line something or other CSM. I haven't got my readers on. Anyway, it's a nice beach multiplier reel. Also, I use it for boat work a lot. Don't tell anybody, but it's great for pollock fishing. No, we don't sell them. I'm just telling you what I use to save me answering 452 emails. Got a nice big handle to it. Now, this is a multiplier reel for all you beginners out there. What it does is it multiplies the amount of line coming onto the reel for each turn of the handle. Like this. As you turn the handle, let's say from 12 o'clock position, it goes round and round and round like this. It's 12 o'clock again, but if you come in here, you'll see how many times that spool revolves, and that's called your gear ratio. So from here, the spool goes around about 1, 2, 3, 4 and a bit turns. So it's multiplying the retrieve ratio of your reel when you're winding in. If you get rocky, snaggy grounds, you can use, I used to use a reel, what was it called? I think it was called a Speedmaster, I think it was. I used a lot before it disintegrated, had it years. That was something like 6-to-1 retrieve ratio. So therefore, when you're whizzing the line in, turning the handle quickly, you've got that lead up and off the bottom, and you've got your fish. Generally, I guess an average would be probably 4-4.5 to 1 retrieve ratio. Now here you have the release button to put it into free spool for casting, okay? It's just a push button. Push that, it takes it out of gear and it releases for casting or lowering down to the seabed if you're in a boat, okay? To put that reel back in gear, most of the reels, I can only speak for this one, you turn the reel handle, automatically engages here. You'll see that pop back out again. See it? So it's out of gear, let's call it break off if you like, in gear, driving, or away you go again. Now, in addition to this, you have a star drag. This is the brake, should you need it, for a big fish taking line. Most of the fish in the UK, well, we don't really play fish on a drag, do we? You know, not a lot. They don't really go screaming out 200 yards of line like a bonefish or anything, but nevertheless, you need to be aware of it. You want to get this done up tight, is generally this direction. If you're looking at it from that way, clockwise. That's quite tight, you know, you can see the line coming off. You think, oh, maybe I'm going to lose that fish. I'll tweak it up a little bit more. Yes, the brake is much, much tighter. Now, when you're casting, you want to keep it tight, okay? If you're playing a fish in, a big fish, you might want to come back on it and let the fish take some line, you know, so that you don't break it off effectively. But for casting, I like to keep mine pinched up tight. That is your star drag. Some people call it a clutch. It's not really a clutch, it's a drag. Now, in here, inside here, are little pressure plates that push together. It can be fibre washers, different materials that help make a sort of braking mechanism. So, let's talk about casting. You're going to be casting, I'm talking right-handed here, with your thumb on the spool like this. Okay, so that's going to stop it revolving. But you've got to use a shock leader. Regardless of whether you're going to go pendulum casting or trying to cast 200 yards, you really should have some form of shock leader on it. I think I've got 50-pound, I think it's Andy Yellow. This is a tournament one we use for marlin fishing, so I'll be hard, well, I'm never breaking it, I don't think, with a beach rod, if the marlin don't break it. I've got it as well so that you can see it. You want the length of the rod, a few turns of the spool, and the drop down to the clip where you put your terminal rig, you know, you attach your terminal rig. However, I use here a knot. Let's say the reel line is 15 pounds, which is sort of the minimum I would use for beach fishing, onto, let's say, 50-pound shock leader. Lines of different diameter. The best knot was designed by Captain Jimmy Albright. It was a Florida guide, he designed it. It's called the Albright Special. If you look on our knots, one of our knots films, it's up there, definitely the Albright Special. I use that. However, you can also use tapered leaders, and the shock leader will taper down to a finer knot. Just makes life a little bit easier. The reason being, you can catch your thumb on that knot there, right? So my suggestion, I've actually got a lot on here, a shock leader, purely because we wanted to use it for filming. Right, first things first when you're retrieving, let's assume you've got your cast out, and we hope you have, without a bird's nest. When you come to retrieve, don't just crank and wind it so all that line is coming in straight down here, because you will get a big bulge of line here bulked up. It will either jam on these cross support bars, or when you cast again, you will get the most horrific bird's nest. You need to lay that line backwards and forwards evenly so it doesn't sort of cross over itself, like this. Now here's the knot. That's the Albright knot I was talking about earlier. I'm going to lay that on the right hand side, and I'm just going to crisscross there, a couple of turns, and then I'm going to put the rest of the leader, as I say, I am using a long one for filming here, I wouldn't use it this long normally, 5 or 6 turns around there, on this side. That's because I don't want to put my thumb there. I could put my thumb this side, and that knot, when it flies out under pressure, doesn't snag on my finger, which is already done because I've been casting, doing shots for you for the camera. So put it that side, and that's a safe way to do it. The other thing you must do is this. I'm just using 15-pound Andy on this reel. And that's what I use mostly for my main line because it is very abrasion resistant. I've used it for possibly 30 or 40 years. It's tried and tested. It's an American line. Pretty good stuff. Maybe not the greatest for distance casting, but for me, I think Joe Average going fishing, pretty hard wearing stuff. Okay, when you spool up, don't spool up right to the edge of the multiplier spool here, because when you get that initial momentum going with a cast, this is all compounded on there and it's whoosh, it's trying to go too fast. In other words, once the lead is pulling that line off the spool will start accelerating almost faster than the lead can pull the line out, and that's how a bird's nest starts. So just leave, I don't know, a few millimeters down there, if you can see that in there, a gap, and just snip it off. You might be, I don't know, what are you going to save, 30 yards of line? But that 30 yards of line less will stop that reel giving you one of those overruns or bird's nest. Now some reels come with level winds. A level wind here, on this one, this Akios, I've actually, I don't know, cut it off or hacked it off, I don't know, it's off. Because level winds I don't like myself personally, because the line lay is too far apart. You know, it's zigzag, it's fine for boat fishing, but for decent fishing, minimising bird's nests, and that's what I'm talking about, if I could lay that on touching turns, I would do. Obviously, I'm not that accurate, but look how many times I'm laying that side by side. You might be able to see it with the yellow there. Now, if I used a level wind, it would be zzz, and when it goes to cast off, the level wind is going, it can't cope with it. I'm not saying to give you a bird's nest, it will cut your distance down. Most distance guys will remove the bars. Probably if you buy a reel with a level wind, better, rather than muller it like I generally do, go into a tackle dealer, go to, you know, one of the South Coast surf guys and get them to take the bar out properly and get it removed. Or indeed, when you buy it, say, well, I want it, but I don't want the level wind. Up to you guys. But that's what most of the long distance guys do, is they're going to remove the level wind. There we go, that touch up there. I'm just going to show you now a couple of the controls that you can use to help minimise those bird's nests again. In here, if you can just see that, behind the star drag there's a nut. It's a bit fiddly to get your fingers on. You can also adjust that. This is how I'm doing it. This is a Graeme Pullen way of doing it. You can adjust that tension on there so it actually pushes down on the spindle at either end. It gives you a very slight extra braking should you want it. It's got one there, and if I turn it over, it's got one you can see here. If you pinch those down tight, when you take it out of gear like this, it's going to, look, it's very, very hard for the lead to pull that off. Okay, so if you just release it a little bit, you'll see, look, much easier to come off. Now that was something we used all the time. Generally the outside plate damper was the one we would adjust the sink fall of the lead weight, you know, so we got it just right. Now you can get different types of plus and minus levers here with, if you can imagine like a fulcrum system, there's two bars come out and little pips on the end, and you can adjust those, or you can even have magnets like these. You can have a magnet in there which helps slow that spool revolution down. I mean, I'm not going to take this apart on the beach, but if you look on the internet, I dare say there might be one that's got an exploded diagram. In fact, your reel when you buy it probably will have an exploded diagram, and you can see how either magnetic or fulcrum ones work. They're additional braking. All I can tell you, all I'm giving you is the average. Now I want to show you how I get my average casting with a multiplier to minimise those bird's nests. Now then, when you're casting, I feel myself one of the most important points is what the length of drop is you have from the tip of the rod to your lead weight. Now your lead weight is where everything is bulked up together with the bait and all your different rigs, your pulley rigs, your clips, your beads and everything else. But the lead is the densest material, and that's where the power is going to be transmitted from the lead via the rod. That's what you're using. You're accelerating the lead away. I don't like having it really near the tip of the rod, okay, unless I'm doing close inshore fishing. And then definitely do not do, as I said earlier, the overhead cast, because that's just going to snatch and then it's going to bird's nest your spool. You're always going to need to throw it on a slight curve, and you release it as you feel that pressure build up here with your thumb. Initially also, you don't want it down here. I mean, the pendulum casters, if you watch them, we've actually got a film up down on the North Somerset coast about smoothhounds with a guy called Courtney Creech. Now, forget people who think they can cast really nice. This guy casts to perfection and catches to perfection. He is a master. After 40 years, he is the best pendulum caster I've seen. I'm not talking distance, I'm talking absolutely a perfect cast to look at, and boy does he catch some fish. but he knows how to pendulum cast. We're talking basic casting here. So don't fish it too short, don't fish it too long. I've got a 12-foot Coniflex 2400 rod here. I judge mine by the butt ring. Now, I haven't measured it. I would suggest I'm almost halfway up with the lead there. Now that allows me enough to give it a bit of a sort of pendulum swing away for casting like that. I can get it nicely balanced like that, and I can flex that rod up for casting and get the power out there as well. You might want to try it. I would suggest for beginners a little bit less, just a turn or two less than halfway up the rod. I say it's not an exact science. 12-foot rod, let's say 4 to 5 foot drop. Give it a go. That's all you can do, and practice where there are no people, please. Okay, I'm facing sort of sideways to where I want to cast, up this way. I'm going to rock back like this, lean slightly towards it, but do make sure your legs are apart, you've got good, you know, really good support for your feet. Be careful on rocks, could be wet and slippery. Be careful on boulders and stones. It's really easy to twist an angle, really. And don't try and overcook the cast. If you try and overcook the cast when you're a beginner, you get a bird's nest. It's a nightmare. You're not fishing properly, you catch nothing. Better to cast, I feel, a bit shorter, be satisfied with it, and the bait is out there. Do your practice casting out on an open beach, out on an open field where there's no people around, no anybody around, and then, you know, convert that to when you go fishing. And still, don't think I'm going for the big one. We all do it, we all get it, and yeah, here it goes. No, not all the fish are miles out. A lot of them are closer in. I've got my thumb on the spool. I've got the lead about 5 feet down there, exactly where I want the lead. So I can release it. I've got my drag done up here, nice and tight, so it's not going to slip. I'm going to release the button there, as you can see, so it can revolve, and I've got my thumb away from the leader knot, whatever size it is, okay? The dampers I've got set here, just so that just revolves, right? Look, the weight of the lead and a little bit of my thumb pressure lets it go. You do not want it, if I back those off, you do not want it, there's your bird's nest. That is the bird's nest. Instantly you can see it's too loose. So I'll peel that one out, and then we'll get that set and we'll show you a cast. Okay, so I've now adjusted the dampers on the reel and or the magnet if you want, so the lead just goes but not too fast. Now when I do cast, I lightly brush that spool, very, very lightly, and if it starts to over accelerate to give me that bird's nest, which I don't want, I can just tease it and just hopefully slow it down. So I've got my feet well established with a good wide base. I've got my body here, I'm ready to build the cast up from the swing away. I'm going to come around in that arc here, 45 degrees, so I'm staying in constant contact with the lead at all times. I'm not snatching at it, I'm not jerking it out there, which creates the overrun. And I'm going to pull down on my left hand to help accelerate that rod and bring it through in a nice, clean, smooth movement. And that's what you want for trouble-free casting. Here we go. Pull down, and away it goes, nice and smooth. I didn't even have to put my thumb on that because I got it break down. Now if I want to cast further, you don't necessarily have to cast harder and use more effort. You can just tease these. They've got plus and minus on them, you know, for more pressure, less pressure. You can tease these open a little bit and you'll get even further with it. Don't forget, when you retrieve in, use your thumb like this, just like that, and spread that line slowly from side to side. And you can see how many revolutions of the reel I'm getting before. What you don't want this, look, you do not want this, because when that comes off, it's zigzagging faster than the leg can pull it off. It accelerates the spool, it's job done, you're going to get a bird's nest. Always, always, and it's hard to remember even when you're playing a fish, you know, don't bulk it up on one side. Always try and remember when you're fighting the fish, the guys do a lot of beach fishing, to just do it automatically. As they're fighting the fish in, they're using this thumb to spread the line, look, like that, straight across the spool, touching turns. Obviously, for those who want to notice anything, I've only done that for the camera because I really want this on that side, don't I? As I said earlier, put it on the other side. So we just toss it away, and as I bring it in like this, I want to cover the knot, bury it, and there I am, I've got half the spool ready to go. So what exactly is all this talk, all this dirty talk about bird's nests and overruns? Well, I've backed off both dampers and the magnet. I'm going to see if I can get one to start to form for you. If we get it in slow motion, you might see the coils build up. You might even see them jam. Although you don't want to see it, I certainly don't, but at least I'm not proud. If I can get you a bird's nest, I will do, or the starter one. Let's take a crack at it. So the bird's nest can actually happen at any time during that cast. At the start, at the middle, and even towards the end. Just watch the spool stop. As it stops, you can see it's jammed up with a loop or two of line there, and that's what's going to make it difficult. That is what is going to stop you fishing. Effectively, the best way to get around this is adjust those dampers, but mostly important, even when you've got a fish on, try and wind it under a constant pressure. If you get weed on there, don't just haul it in with the weed, cranking and cranking. Try and pump it in so that you don't get what we call the rubber band effect with a line that will burst off quicker because it's stretched when it's put on there. If you can get touching turns on the reel, you will get a much smoother cast when you come to do it. A lot of anglers don't realise that, and here you can see if you keep it smooth, fluid, flow through, you're going to get a much smoother cast. And hopefully, if you get those two dampers adjusted, you adjust the magnetic brake, whatever braking system you got on the reel, you should be hopefully trouble free. But just remember, line lay is critical. So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope for you beginners out there, there's a few tips in there, basic, totally awesome fishing tips that might enable you to get a nice picture like this, smooth running multiplier, and you're going to get some fish at the end of the day.